A very good evening to all of you, and we are meeting back again in our webinar series, Meeting a CEO. And of course, it's a specialty today, going beyond the CEO forum, looking at some of the very contemporary issues that we need to pay attention to. So, to start with our session today, we also have our dear chairman, Mr. Bandula Egodagi, with us. We would like to hear from him before we move into the chief speaker of the day today. Chairman, over to you.
Hi, thank you very much, Kaushali. Today is a specialized day for APIT because we have been doing this CEOs forum many times. In fact, our spectrum has widened. Today we are going to talk about the climate change. It's a new topic for our APIT students. In fact, thank you very much for being with us, the chief guest today. In spite of a very busy schedule, you may have seen that we have been conducting this CEOs forum to get the direct interaction with our students. That is the whole objective. As you know that APIT known as the quality education, we believe that beyond education, we need to have some extra curricular activities to build up these leadership skills within our students population. So you being a specialized personality, intend to spend your valuable time with our students. It's a immense important factor for us, for APIT, and especially for Sri Lankan student population. So thank you very much for being with us, and hopefully our students are willing to listen to you and to practice whatever the important factors that you are going to share with our people. I have to reiterate the fact APIT believing many things of building leadership. And also thinking out of the box sort of a approach, and innovative ideas, and the things that we are currently doing in a innovative platform. So all these important factors will take it from people like you, and also we are giving that opportunity to our students to take the maximum out from your personality like you all. So Dr. Rohanta is the driving force for this one, and he is bringing many different versatile approach to this forum. I'm sure you can add many things as our chief guest today. So thank you very much once again, Rohanta. Over to you, and thank you, Kaushali, for organizing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and it's actually an honor to have you, Talal. You're the World Bank Climate Change Ambassador for Sri Lanka. It's an ambassadorial job which very few in the world get, and actually we from Sri Lanka honored to have have a Sri Lankan get this kind of responsibility. The World Economic Forum nominated Talal as a young global leader for his work on inspiring, connecting and transforming society for a better. Talal was part of an expert panel at Chatham House, London, Royal Institute for International Affairs, along with the industry experts from Goldman Sachs and World Bank on the topic the COVID-19 gender gap and how women's experience and expertise will drive economic revival on formulating recommendations for the leaders of the G7 and G20 countries. He consults as an industry expert at Multi University, Entrepreneurship Center under World Bank Ahead program. He's also a selection committee and a jury panel of the Asian Development Bank Digital Against COVID-19 Innovation Series. Talal has been an advocate on the topic of climate change through his work on entrepreneurship, development. He mentors and advises startups in ensuring that their business models are environmentally sustainable and mitigate climate change. As a co-founder of the revolutionizing co-working space company HubPoint, Talal sought to leverage his international experience in addressing a key gap in the commercial real estate sector in Sri Lanka. As a co-founder of the T3 Follow, Talal provided digital marketing solutions and insights to a diverse clientele. He's on the board of directors for the Kaufman Foundation Global Entrepreneurship Network for Sri Lanka and also writes for the Forbes. I, in fact, read your latest article that appeared about 2 days back, Talal, and it was really fantastic. Talal is a member of the National Agenda Committee on Entrepreneurship and Ecosystem at the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. And when you look at this profile, you see that Talal, I mean, you've done fantastic at such a young age, and it's actually an honor to host this program with you. As you know, we've had the chairperson for Unilever a few weeks back. Then we had the ambassador to China. Then we had the ambassador to UK from Sri Lanka. We had the ambassador to Singapore. We had the CEO of Munchie and Maliban. I mean, it's been a fantastic experience uh, to have these kind of personalities, and this is the first time I think we are hosting a youngster, but who has been recognized by World Bank, and it's actually an honor to present to you, Talal. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot, Dr. Rohanta, for that great introduction. And it's a pleasure to be on this show. And my thanks to Bandula as well, and to all the students watching this and everyone else. So before I go into the presentation, I'd like to just briefly introduce myself. So most of my career, profession, you can say, even my entrepreneurship journey, everything, if you see the bottom theme of it comes under entrepreneurship. So just to give a brief introduction or about a short thing about my journey, I would say my thing started in London. So after completing our studies, we came back to Sri Lanka, and we were, me and a couple of other co-founders, we were doing a number of startups in digital marketing. The other one was organic foods. And one of the key things we found was while looking for an office space for one of our businesses, we ran into so many issues with the commercial real estate market in Colombo, dealing with landlords, utilities, getting furniture, providing tea and coffee for the people working there, and all kinds of issues. So being an entrepreneur, we thought our job is to solve the problem in society. So that's when we came up with the concept of HubPoint, which is one of Sri Lanka's first co-working spaces. So that made us quite prominent, and it led to a slow revolutionizing of the commercial real estate market in Colombo. And after that, I joined a USAID project where we were working on developing entrepreneurship there as well, mainly supporting incubators, accelerators. But the main role there for me was developing a nationwide mentoring platform. So that's one thing. And after that, currently I'm working as well. I moved into consulting as an industry expert at the Moratuwa University under the World Bank's AHEAD project. So here we are working to commercialize final year projects of Moratuwa University. So currently we're developing incubators there, and we want to develop a kind of entrepreneurship ecosystem around the university. So we have a number of partners there, Ernst & Young, USAID, and Nielsen, the Employers Federation. And currently we're working with two universities, one from the US and one from Singapore as well. So the main role is to kind of create an ecosystem around the university. As we all know, as I'll go through the talk, Silicon Valley is powered by Stanford. So we want to do something, though it will take some time, to do something similar in Sri Lanka. So that's the general scope of the project. And after that, just a brief thing, I was a global selection committee member at the Asian Development Bank's Digital Against COVID Innovation Series. So here too, we were focusing on bringing innovative startups. So one key differentiator here was that unlike other projects, with the ADB would not just give a prize, but would also make sure these entrepreneurs completed their journey. And other than that, I'm also involved in working on gender equality. So on the entrepreneurship side, I was with the team, as Dr. Rohanta already said, working on formulating recommendations for the G7, G20 leaders on gender equality post-COVID. And other than that, writing for Forbes and the Daily Financial Times. So that's a brief introduction of myself. So I'll just go into giving a short presentation. I want to speak more on entrepreneurship development, and after that speak on climate change and how I feel that entrepreneurs could be the driving force in the fight against climate change. So let me go into the presentation. So the topic is entrepreneurship and climate change. These are the areas just I focus on: entrepreneurship, which mostly, and gender equality and climate change. And that's my profile, my LinkedIn, Twitter. Please feel free to connect with me. And diving into the topic, entrepreneurship development. So there are 6 pillars, I would say, though different organizations could come up with different numbers. McKinsey says it's 3. But dividing it into 6 areas: policy, finance, markets, human capital, infrastructure, and culture. So these are the 6 areas under entrepreneurship development. And before that, speaking about why entrepreneurship is essential. Living in a free market country, we would say that entrepreneurs are the ones who create jobs, as well as create a platform for the government to get taxes. So even when you look at government employees, the taxes the government collects for them to be paid comes from most of the private sector. So that is a major reason for entrepreneurs to thrive, for the need for them to thrive. And as you know, they contribute to economic growth. So entrepreneurs are needed when it comes to growing the economy, because the more entrepreneurs, the more cash flow, the more wealth generated. And the other thing is job creation. This is a very important thing when it comes to entrepreneurship. So as we know, in Sri Lanka, we find that a lot of people tend to look for jobs, and they sometimes expect the government to provide jobs. And there's nothing wrong with the government giving them jobs. But one thing is, this is not sustainable in the long term, because the government simply cannot keep giving jobs without increasing the number of entrepreneurs. So in the long term, it's just going to lead to more debt and eventually inflation. So job creation, why I emphasize this is, when you develop an entrepreneur, you're not only reducing the number of job seekers, but also creating a job creator. So on average, if you say an entrepreneur creates half a dozen jobs, you create 1,000 entrepreneurs, there's 5,000 jobs to be created. And there's so much of tax revenue and so much money in circulation. So these are some of the reasons from the government side why entrepreneurship is essential. And the third thing is innovation, bringing in innovation. So if you see, most of the innovation comes from entrepreneurs. I mean, I agree that, universities and other organizations do, and large corporations do bring in innovation, but most of it takes a young entrepreneur to change things, bring in an idea on a global scale, like Henry Ford with revolutionizing the car industry, or Elon Musk with the electric car revolution, and Steve Jobs with the smartphones and iTunes. So, from the perspective of the students, y'all, why should y'all be entrepreneurs? The reason is, there's so many reasons, but just 2 I would say. One is the potential for creating a better life, not just for you, but for the coming generations. I always say this, for example, I was able to go to a private school. I was able to study abroad. That was because my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they were all entrepreneurs. They took the risk, they created the business. And because of that, I am enjoying whatever they created. So it's the same for any other entrepreneurs. You take the risk and you develop something, you create the wealth, and it's going to last even after your lifetime. And also the fact that unlike working for somebody else, the harder you work, somebody else benefits. Like Steve Jobs says, It's just don't live your life for somebody else and somebody else's dream. So entrepreneurship is whatever hard work you put in, it's for yourself. And those are the two main reasons for you all to be entrepreneurs, I would say. And the last one was Jeff Bezos, like he says, a regret. You don't want to be at the age, at old age, and think I could have done this, that. So this is the time for you to seriously think about this. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the field of climate change. There's so many industries coming in, so many ideas for you to take up and probably change the world as well. Like Elon Musk has shown, not just become a hero, but you can also become the richest man in the world. So diving into the 6 pillars, the first one would be policy. When you need for us to develop a successful entrepreneurship ecosystem. So let's look at the policy. Like regarding Sri Lanka, I would say regulations. We need better regulations, because currently, if you see the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report, Sri Lanka ranks at 99th in the world. So, and New Zealand ranks number 1, because New Zealand, everything is made very convenient, and it only takes half a day for them to register a company and start the business. So that is the reason why Singapore is ranks number 1, and Singapore and other countries rank at the top level. So we need to change some of these factors, like especially registering a company, even closing down a company, because most people don't want to register a company because of the fact that they're worried that it takes more energy to close a company than it takes to open one. And at the same time, like one chairman I recently spoke to was saying, EPF, ETF, other taxes all go to different departments. So when you start a business, you need somebody, especially you need to hire someone just to do all these things. So that on the side costs money. So we need to look at this aspect. And the other thing is we also need to create research centers. So an ability for us entrepreneurs to be able to work with universities. So there are startups in the chemical engineering field or engineering field who need labs to work on. So rather than them getting investment and creating and buying all the equipment, it'll be good if they can work with universities, of course, giving them a royalty fee. So to improve this. And also universities in Sri Lanka, I would say, would be better if they were funded better and in a sense deregulated, because the process is quite high, very slow. And labor laws, I don't have to say much. This is a primary concern when it comes to investors looking into Sri Lanka. And the last thing is contract enforcement. So this is one problem faced by entrepreneurs because though we rank 99th on the ease of doing business of the World Bank's report, we rank 162nd when it comes to contract enforcement. And the World Bank, the report does not just take an average throughout the country, but it takes an average of the capital city. Like if it's India, it's Delhi, or Japan, it's Tokyo. But for Sri Lanka, it's Colombo. And what is really unfortunate is that contract enforcement, the business courts, it takes around 4 years on average to solve a case. So this is one, not just a problem for investors, but also a problem for entrepreneurs partnering up with others or with getting new suppliers, customers. So this is an issue. And when it comes to finance, is talking about in the scope of entrepreneurship development. So I've been really talking about this, especially at Chatham House, and we've also done work through this with the USAID project. So it's most of the banks give based on assets. So that is another factor as entrepreneurs you have to look into. So that's why a lot of Sri Lankan entrepreneurs usually get their money from family and friends or put in their own money. And we are doing programs. We did through the USAID project programs to educate bank officers to give them based on cash flow. But the problem is women entrepreneurs and especially young entrepreneurs do not have financial records. So one suggestion I gave at Chatham House was to proliferate fintech. So that is one area. And at the same time, can't blame the banks as well. One thing they said was because a lot of people deposit money at the banks, saying it's safe. So it's a bit, they're a bit concerned on investing it on startups as well. So just to defend the bankers. And we need much more VCs and angel investors. So that's one area. How I'll later speak on Silicon Valley, why it's one of the most successful, if not the most successful entrepreneurship ecosystem in the world. Because a colleague of mine said, when you play golf at Silicon Valley and you hit the golf ball, there's a 50% chance that it's going to hit the head of a VC. So with that kind of the number of VCs present, we can, I mean, not that much, even if we can get 10% of that number, we could make real change. And the last thing is the Colombo Stock Exchange. So this is something, this is another great initiative, which this CSE has brought in, the Empower SME Board, which says we, even with stated capital of 25 million, a company can list. So I'm also, like, we've informally formed an advisory group on this, me and Rajiv and two others, to develop this, because I feel that with something like this, it will make life a lot easier for entrepreneurs to get investment in, because they can always pledge to a VC or an angel investor that give us the money. The Colombo Stock Exchange has an SME board. So in a couple of years, we make a pledge that we would list and you can take your money and exit. So this is another good development when it comes to access to finance. And markets, access to markets. I'd like to speak on networking. So this is another area we've been working on. I was recently, a couple of years ago, was appointed to the board of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. So that is a global network which has entrepreneurs ranging from Richard Branson and others. So here in the Sri Lankan board, we've formed the number of prominent individuals where we focus on improving networking. So that is one thing, because I understand in Colombo, we do have very good networking, but especially when it comes to the corporate sector, they network among themselves, the professors network among themselves, the young startups, now we see a very prominent, a very vibrant crowd coming in, they have their own networks. What we need to do is kind of mix everything. So the chairmen of the big corporations can talk to young startups, can give them ideas, exchange views, and potentially invest in them. At the same time, these startups could get these large corporations as customers and suppliers. So this is one area we need to work on. And always I encourage people to look more at LinkedIn, because as you can see the stats, 90% of social traffic is driven by these three networks, and LinkedIn has the majority of the social traffic, especially when it comes to the business community. And another very encouraging thing for entrepreneurs, if you want to take up entrepreneurship, is as a country, we have a lot of Sri Lankans living abroad, relatives. So I've always said that this is a good opportunity for exporting, because usually when we try to export something and there's somebody abroad, they don't want to, one of the reasons is because they look for validation. They don't really trust the person here. So if you always have a relative, there's always a potential to do business abroad. Not to do with the relative. I mean, he or she can always find somebody else. And there's also a thing, especially with a lot of Sri Lankans living abroad, a lot of potential in the BPO industry, the BPM industry, for Sri Lankan companies, young entrepreneurs to start outsourcing companies. So it's another area. And another component of developing an entrepreneurship ecosystem is human capital. We need to develop skill sets for the future, because whatever is done today is not enough. And as you can see at the side, there's a number of areas where we need to change on. And if you take the country Singapore, they're not even looking at 2025, they're looking at 2050. So that's how far-reaching they're thinking on. And we really need to focus on this, because another topic which I take interest in is future of work. And according to McKinsey, there's 700 million jobs could be lost by 2030 due to automation. So we need to reskill ourselves on this, not just for entrepreneurs, but for professionals as well, because there is the competition that's going to come from the machines. And I was hearing a talk by the global MD of McKinsey some time ago. And he was saying two things machines cannot do. That one would be leadership, and the other thing would be creativity. So if my advice is to concentrate on these two areas. And speaking of the other thing, education. Like I mentioned, we need to have an education based on creativity. So like a two-way thing, rather than being taught something and for the students to take that into their heads and write it down on a piece of paper. So this kind of a change in education, like how Singapore does, it's at some grades, it's taken away the exams. So we need to kind of change it to make it more entrepreneurial. And also talking about when it comes to human capital, we need to look seriously into serial entrepreneurship. We find something that when somebody starts a startup and it fails, they tend to give up and move away. So the thing about entrepreneurship is it's not going to be easy at the beginning, but as you go on, you're going to become a lot more successful. And not just for startups that fail, I would say that even companies that are doing well should not stick to that business, but also start something new, an additional one. And we need more serial entrepreneurs. The best example would be Elon Musk. I mean, he didn't stop with Tesla. He started SolarCity and the SpaceX and other ventures as well, like the Boring Company. So we need more that type of entrepreneurs to start several startups after becoming successful in one. And the last thing is we need entrepreneurship skills. So this is another thing that me and Professor Rohan Munasinghe at Moratuwa University are working on. We are looking to bring in entrepreneurship as a module into the studies there. So, the whole point is that the Moratuwa University has engineering students, chemical engineering students, and architects, IT professionals. So in all of their courses, we want to introduce the module of entrepreneurship. So when they come out of universities graduating, they don't have, the only option would not be to work for a company, but they will also have the necessary skills to start their own business. So when I speak about entrepreneurship skills, it's subjective. Different people have different definitions. But in my view, it's mostly leadership, communications, and networking skills. So these are some areas which we lack on, especially when it comes to Moratuwa University. Just to give a thing, we have a drone technology, startups with drone technology, and AI to control traffic and everything. But one area we need to really work on is their communications, their leadership skills, their networking skills. And another thing would be infrastructure. As you can see on my screen, there's a huge rise in the number of accelerators and incubators. So we need more of these to support entrepreneurs, because when you look at an accelerator, it's not a medium just to get support and just to get introduced to a VC or an angel investor, but you're also getting other kind of support, legal support, accounting, and also the kind of validation. Because in a study in the UK, it found that about 66%, it varies, of startups who were at incubators said that it was very essential. So I would, anybody who has ambitions to become entrepreneurs, I would strongly advise you to get into incubators and accelerators. They play a major role. And the other thing is infrastructure, meaning we provide this as well at the incubator at the university. It's legal services and accounting services, because we find that a lot of startups spend a lot of time when it comes to registering, doing other things, as well as on the tax side, the accounting work. So what we do is we try to get partners, voluntary partners, to do these things so that the entrepreneurs can focus just on their own startups. So these are things that we need, and these are the advantages of joining an incubator. And of course, the logistics, the transport, the internet, infrastructure, all the other areas. And as I mentioned, we need mentors as well. So with my work at the USAID project, where I was instrumental in designing a mentoring platform, one of the things why I would very, very strongly advise people to get mentors is because it has a huge effect on the performance as well as future thinking. For example, not just do mentors give advice about what to do with business or access to markets or connecting with VCs or how to communicate and other things, but also emotional intelligence. Because when you see a lot of startups, which through my experience I've found, they make emotional decisions. Some of them after a couple of failures or deals not going through or unable to get a customer, they get very emotional, make a decision, close the company and walk away. Or at the same time, they get something very good, they get very excited and make a very bad decision out of happiness. So when you have a mentor, who is much more experienced, he will like slow them down in either way. So that's one crucial thing. And also, according to research, we found that even established startups, after beyond 5 years, we find that the failure rate is around 50%. So with successful mentoring, it comes down to 30%. So even for established businesses, with mentoring, we can bring the failure rate down by 40%. So these are advantages of getting a mentor. And you're also tapping into their experience. Like when you talk about a mentor, for a student in their 20s and you get a mentor who is in his 60s, I mean, his experience is your whole entire lifetime. So that's the amount of experience they bring in with their advice. So would strongly advise on that. And the last thing, we need more innovation series. Like the one, a good example is the one I was working with the Asian Development Bank. So there, like I mentioned before, the Asian Development Bank not just gave a prize after looking at the most innovative startups there, but they also gave their expertise and made sure these entrepreneurs completed their journey. And the last thing is culture. So we need also to change the culture around entrepreneurship. One thing we've noticed in Sri Lanka, we are quite risk averse. And the thing is, we do very poorly when it comes to entrepreneurship, because the formal number of entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka goes at 3%, though the figures can vary, but it's roughly around that number. And that is very low, because when you compare to countries like Vietnam and Thailand, they have 20%. So in the context of their population, with respect to their the percentage of their population, I mean, Vietnam and Thailand have 6 times more entrepreneurs. So this is something Sri Lanka has to work on. And to work on, we need to kind of show them what is the potential of entrepreneurship, what is the thing you can, the change you can bring, the amount of wealth that can be created, and the feeling of being your own boss. So these are things that need to be taught, especially for aspiring entrepreneurs. And also more success stories. So this was one area I was, one of my key recommendations when I was working with Chatham House on women entrepreneurs post-COVID. So to encourage more women entrepreneurs, we find that especially in the tech sector, even in the UK, according to PwC, only 5% of the leaders in the tech sector were women. So that is something. So we need more success stories, especially in the tech sector for women entrepreneurs. And the fact that we need to have a culture of experimenting. So a culture of where failure is okay. As I'll speak on why Silicon Valley happens to be one of the most successful entrepreneurship ecosystems in the world is because it's kind of okay to fail there. Even Google, they have these their moonshot projects, where the thing about Google is that the employees are given a day. Out of 5 days, they're given 1 day off. It's it's called the 20% project. And they're encouraged to think 10x. So the thing is, they don't want the founders of Google, the management does not want their employees to come up with a project that will increase revenue by 10%. They want it something that will increase their revenue by 10 times. So something like a moonshot project, something that has only 1% chance of succeeding, but still they want them to go on with it. And if it fails, it's fine, because they say that the second attempt, they would have learned something from the first. So this is the kind of culture we need to create. And a perfect example would be Jeff Bezos. So when he, the thing about him is that it took him nearly 8 years of experimenting to get the Amazon business model right. And an interesting thing about him is to share is that when he was a small boy, he used to go to his grandmother's grandparents' farm for the summer holidays. And there, when their tractor failed or when some farm equipment was not working, they would not call a mechanic. They would all sit down and keep experimenting 100 different ways until they got this right. So this is what led him to do the same when it comes to Amazon, which eventually made him, currently he is the world's richest man. And so that's something we need to bring in when it comes to entrepreneurship in the context of Sri Lanka. And the other thing is ambition. That's another area which we lack. We need to encourage more people to think big, because even recently speaking to someone who had a factory, who was given a much bigger order, but he was, when I spoke to him and encouraged him to take it, I mean, the banks were supporting him. He was like, I have a car, I have a bungalow, I have one factory, I don't want to expand in or start another two. So that's one thing about the difference between Silicon Valley and the Sri Lankan ecosystem, where we need to encourage people to be more ambitious so that they can keep scaling up endlessly. And the last thing is also working on entrepreneurship, talking to a lot of people, we find that the social status of entrepreneurship has to be increased. One thing that's said by people, so though I mean, most of you all may not agree, is that we find that people who are most successful in the classroom tend to get jobs at a good company and move on. It's usually people who cannot pass or cannot get a job, as they say, who move into entrepreneurship. But this is not the case. This is definitely not true. But this is some of the this is the kind of thinking some people have about entrepreneurs. So we need to kind of change that thing. You know, we need to be like successful students also want to go into entrepreneurship. So that's a brief thing about entrepreneurship development and going through the 6 pillars. And just to very briefly run through Silicon Valley, I wrote an article on Daily FT. I mean, you can Google and find it, where I explain in much greater detail some of the reasons why Silicon Valley is probably the most successful entrepreneurship ecosystem. Is Stanford drives a lot. Having a university putting out brilliant graduates makes a big difference. So I would say students watching this should do the same thing, you know, come out and help Sri Lanka create a successful entrepreneurship ecosystem. And they have a networking thing. So everyone, like-minded people, they're all within one region and they get to meet, exchange ideas, and they're there to help each other. One person helps another person and they help them back. So this is the kind of thing we need here as well. And innovation. So Silicon Valley is successful because they have one thing, they have a very high percentage of companies compared to the rest of the world having an innovation strategy embedded in their corporate strategy. So that is another area. Let me just quickly go through because of the time. And scaling. So because of the huge number of VCs there, who the main purpose of them investing in a company so that the company can grow and they can exit with a much greater return. So because most startups getting funding from VCs, you get this mindset of scaling, constantly scaling. So this is another reason for Silicon Valley. And the last thing would be culture. So this was one thing said by the global MD of McKinsey as well. He was talking about many countries like Russia, Scandinavian countries. They usually send teams to live in Silicon Valley, study the system to replicate it back home. And they were able to do most of the things above except the culture, because the culture takes a lot of time to develop. Probably, if you're very lucky, a decade to develop. So these are some of the reasons what makes Silicon Valley a good example. And so to come on to the second part of the topic, I'll just run through climate change. So this is something quite urgent. And my role as a World Bank GYCN climate ambassador is to bring awareness and form partnerships in bringing the youth together in fighting this thing. Because there, as you can see, Sri Lanka is, according to a study a few years ago, when it comes to natural disasters, we're the second most vulnerable country in the world to climate change. So that's not a good position to be in. And the 4 reasons, though there are a lot more reasons, I'll just briefly touch in: rising sea levels, natural disasters, food shortages, and migration. So just to speak on these, when it comes to rising sea levels, that's one thing we need to be really concerned about. A lot of people, generally you find stats saying 1 degree warmer and sea level is going to rise by a few centimeters in a decade or a couple of decades. So studies vary. But one thing I want to say is, according to studies, if all the ice in the Arctic, the Antarctic, and on the mountaintops melt, sea level will rise up to 216 feet. That is enough to submerge a 20-story building in Colombo. So that's how serious the situation is. And it's not about the world will eventually, after it warms another couple of degrees, we can bring it back to normal. It's like the deeper we get into this, the harder it is to come out. Because in a couple of decades, let's say temperatures rise up to 2 degrees, it'll be much more difficult to reverse it with the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. So we need to act on this immediately. And Sri Lanka, as we're surrounded by the ocean, we could lose nearly half of our land with rising sea levels. I mean, with the extreme going there. So it's not just about, maybe this will not happen in our lifetime, but definitely in the lifetime of our children, grandchildren, if we don't act responsibly. And talking about natural disasters, so the World Bank has named Sri Lanka as a hotspot, meaning we are more likely to be more adversely affected by weather change due to climate change. And we're going to see more hurricanes, more flooding. And as you can see on the left, that's California. So just looking at the picture is quite scary. I mean, this is what happened this year. So due to wildfire, or probably last year. So this is like a perfect scene from a from hell fire. So this is what could become the reality if we don't act now. And the other thing is, especially when it comes to Sri Lanka, we could have food shortages, as 80% of Sri Lanka's food is produced internally. So there is going to be a lot of issues affecting that. And it's not like if weathers change, probably we can import food from outside. I mean, it's, the weather is going to change globally. So other countries too are going to have their agriculture affected. So there is going to be a rising food shortage. That is one concern. With Sri Lanka is going to be affected because 70% of people's livelihoods depend on agriculture. And 43%, that includes nearly half of Sri Lanka's total land. And this will lead to the other thing about the other impact would be migration, internal and external. So when there is a rising sea level, we'll see more people moving to the internal parts of the country, as well as the weather affects farmers and they are unable to produce as much, then they lose their jobs. They're going to be moving into the cities, and they're going to be looking at more jobs in the cities. So this is going to cause more internal migration, more tensions. And the last thing also, we're going to see like a lot of people probably migrating out of the country if things get bad. So these are some of the reasons why we should focus a lot on fighting climate change. And though there is a lot more, for anybody interested in this topic, I've written an article, as Rohantha said, it's published on Forbes. You can Google it. So there I've talked about how corporations can help in the fight against climate change. But here, let me just briefly talk about how entrepreneurs can fight climate change. Because as you know, entrepreneurs have played a major role when it comes to causing climate change in the first place. You see the first 3 industrial revolutions, or Henry Ford or Rockefeller, they were the ones who brought in the oil companies, revolutionized the car industry, which caused which played a major role in causing climate change in the first place. And so I believe that, though they brought in a lot of good for the world, and I believe that entrepreneurs are yet again in the perfect position to reverse it. So a very well-known entrepreneur is Elon Musk fighting it. And he's not just, as I mentioned before, not just an inspirational hero to everybody. People compare him to Iron Man, but he is also made it as the world's richest man. So there is also another prize for people who want to move into entrepreneurship, especially in relation to climate change. So one of the reasons would be innovation. As you know, a lot of innovation comes through entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs with the phones, or Elon Musk with the cars, Henry Ford revolutionizing the cars in the early 20th century, and Bill Gates with Microsoft software. So innovation, entrepreneurs are at the forefront. And just to speak about, though there is a lot of examples I can give outside, speak about the agriculture industry would be a plant-based meat. So that's one area entrepreneurs are working on, lab-grown meat. And a very interesting field is vertical farming. So there's a firm that has got investment from Google, which can produce the same amount that's produced by the traditional farms, but with 95% less water. So these are the kind of innovations we need, especially from entrepreneurs. And the other thing is creating demands. Entrepreneurs are in a position to create demand, especially like they can buy from suppliers who are sustainable, who are environmentally sustainable. Like an example would be Apple. They've committed that by 2030, their entire supply chain is going to be carbon neutral. And Microsoft goes a step further. By 2030, they want it to be carbon negative. So that means using carbon absorption techniques, they want to take back carbon which was emitted. And by 2050, Microsoft wants to take back all the emissions they did from the time it was founded. So to become carbon neutral throughout its history. So these are very promising things coming from large corporations. And the last thing is changing cultures. As we all know, entrepreneurs who have changed cultures a lot, like the founders of Netflix, Airbnb, or Apple, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. So entrepreneurs are in the perfect position and are probably the most powerful force when it comes to fighting climate change. So with that, I'll conclude. Thanks. I'll stop. Right.
That was really fantastic to understand what's happening in the world and what we are going to be faced with if we don't actually take some proper decisions. Talal, I mean, if we go in a little bit of depth to what you said, a recent study has said that almost 90% of executives say that sustainability is very important, but only 60% practice it. Why is this? Which is true. All of us talk so much of sustainability, and when we watched the news on a daily basis, like we were discussing, sometimes you wonder why is it that we don't practice it? What is this gap here?
So that's quite an interesting thing. So it's very easy to convince someone that environmental sustainability is important, but then the implementation has to go a bit further. And even a recent study by Deloitte shows that when it comes to this thinking, even at the board level, when there are discussions, so the strategy, the percentage of time spent on developing strategy is a bit less. And most of the time of the board goes on the operations side of it, the day-to-day activities. So that is one thing, speaking to some board members, that they say that the thing is like it's much tougher to develop a strategy and to enforce it. So changing cultures, because a study by McKinsey shows that it can take up to 6 months, and with a very a strong personality as a CEO to change the culture. So there is always this thing that CEOs are convinced, and another thing is that we find that even though CEOs may not truly be convinced about it, they always, in public, they always want to admit that sustainability is important. So because of the brand value that comes with it, and the reputational concerns. But as a whole, it's to do with the difficulty when it comes to implementing that. There is a lot. You have to get everyone on board. You get the suppliers on board, the customers. There'll be price differences. There'll be it's going to affect when it comes to speaking with the banks, the investors. But one thing that's quite interesting, there was another study, Rohanta, is that those 60%, those 75% of investors in companies, they say that they want sustainability. When a study was done to see the board level, the boards thought that only 60% of the boards thought that investors were interested in sustainability, because most of the board members thought the investors were more like looking into profit. But what is surprising is that the investors are more interested in having sustainability in the companies. So that's also another surprising factor. I mean, the board members misunderstand the investors.
Well, what is your role when you are appointed as an ambassador? I mean, what does the World Bank look for from you?
So the role is mainly to work with youth. So it's to do with educating the youth on this topic, empowering and inspiring them to do more work. So it's mainly to do with organizing events, developing partnerships, and at the same time, inspiring others to become informal ambassadors on this topic. So that is the main role. Though, as my expertise, as I mentioned, is in entrepreneurship, my personal, I would say, plan for the future would be to work on developing climate entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka, and also changing the culture around Sri Lanka towards more sustainability.
So, Talal, how do you reconcile? I mean, youth, as you know, you work with youth. I mean, I'm handling youth for Rotary, and I got about 6,200 interactors who report to me, and I got 7,800 odd Rotaractors reporting. So we got about almost 15,000 people whom I directly work with, together with my whole team that govern them. I mean, one thing I see with youth, which I'm sure you also would notice, is that they have no baggage luggage. They have no biasness for with past experience, and they are very, very straightforward in what they say. I mean, I have seen, even with all the problems of COVID, whenever I go for an Interact Day or a Rotaract Day, the kind of projects that they have done, the bubbliness that they have in the way they run challenges, it's an example to us who sit on corporate boards. So I always take time to listen to youth, because I learn more from youth than actually listening to all these webinars and TED Talks, and what I'm saying. Now, the point I'm saying is that when you're dealing with youth, you have to be very, very straightforward and honest. If you're not honest, they stop believing in you, and if they stop believing in you, you lose them. So how do you reconcile to the kind of destruction that is happening in the country right now as we speak on a daily basis? Vis-a-vis when a youth asks you and say, what are you doing as a climate change ambassador to the World Bank? I mean, you could come out with all the fluffy things in the world, but then they see through you. How do you handle this, Talal?
So, as I mentioned, you're right. Not only are they more aware of these things and they support this, as studies show that they're even willing to take pay cuts to work on companies that are environmentally sustainable, but they're also the most influential when it comes to social media, very active on it. And because even you find that revolutions or protests are much stronger now, and they're less probably organizations are less able to put them down because of the youth involvement, how they communicate with each other, how they organize themselves. So as an ambassador, I always I believe that we can inspire youth to form groups. Recently, with an interview with Daily Mirror as well, I spoke on the same thing. So how youth, especially around universities, around schools, they can form their own this thing, and to kind of change the whole thinking behind it. So form organizations to speak about this, and within share these things among themselves as well. So this, I feel like, would make a major change. Form networks within organizations, and at the same time speak about this, especially with platforms like Twitter. We can raise awareness globally when it comes to these sort of things, as well as the youth are. What is very promising is that as millennials and the Generation Z get in, they are looking more at changing the culture of the large corporations. So sustainability has to play a major role now, because even when it comes to taking jobs, according to a study, we find that the youth prefer to work in a company, even if it means getting less paid. And at the same time, they're also willing to buy products from companies that have a better environmental strategy. So, so these are some of the ways the youth can influence, and they're in a much better position, especially on social media, much more active sharing. So I believe that as a role, by inspiring and empowering youth on climate change, we could make a major difference.
So, Talal, what made you get interested in this kind of work?
Is it entrepreneurship or the climate?
The climate change.
Climate change. So really, my concern was I've been a nature lover for one, and the other thing is, to be very honest, it's the kind of effects that's coming onto us. I mean, we all have children, and I have a 2-year-old son, so I'm pretty concerned about the future of the world. So I want to have a give the next generation a better living standard. So we don't want to have rising sea levels, more disasters. So this was one thing that made me move into this field. So as we need to really bring change when it comes to climate change. And as I mentioned, entrepreneurs could be a driving force for it.
So, tell me, I mean, since you have selected such a challenging job, if I may say, how do you kind of feel end of the day? How do you go to sleep when you see so much of destruction around Sri Lanka? I mean, I'm being very frank to you.
So, I mean, the work has to go on, I guess. So even we all see issues. So that's the role of an entrepreneur. So probably now my job has started now. So I would work on innovative solutions to come up with something, the form of supporting getting into entrepreneurship myself by starting a startup, or supporting others in bringing in technology to fight this. Because one thing I always mention is that people look to the government to do something when it comes to climate change. But I think that the private sector can play a much bigger role. People can play a much bigger role. I mean, at the end, it's just whatever regulations, if the people are buying, if they're the ones who buy the products that lead to deforestation. So if we can convince the people to think better, buy better, and be more sustainable, I think we can create a much bigger impact. Then it's also like we don't have to motivate them, or we don't need regulations to scare them. We don't need a carrot and stick approach. We can just, they themselves will be motivated to do it.
So Talal, has the government ever called you and said, can you help us to look after the environment?
Not yet.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of entrepreneurship, I mean, it's great to see so many ventures coming out, Talal. I mean, I really like the kind of work you do. Um, but one of the problems we have with entrepreneurship is the access to finance. That's one of the key issues that entrepreneurs have. And I remember when I was chairman of the EDB, when I speak to entrepreneurs, some of them say, "So I know that you all are offering all these kinds of different schemes for us to access finance, but the problem we also have is that we don't know how to write a proposal. So because when you go to a bank, they ask for so much of detail that ultimately you say no. I prefer to go and ask my friends and family, which is a better option than trying to get money from bank. So what is your view on this?
So one thing, though it may sound a bit radical, but I certainly don't think is even with Chatham House when it comes to women entrepreneurs. One of my recommendations when it comes to the area of access to finance was to encourage more fintech, more online banking, because when you look at especially rural areas, and this affects women more, you find that banks are not close by, so women have to travel, and so that's one thing is inconvenience. As well as the other thing is safety. So with fintech, we could do this. And people say, it's the rural areas. So people, how are we going to teach them to do this? I mean, but I say that smartphone penetration is growing. And the best example would be PickMe. I mean, we have somebody who convinced all the tuk drivers to make business out of a smartphone. So if this can be done, I'm sure with the proper facilities and training, that too can be done. And also there's this thing about the safety of having money when it comes to women as well in rural areas. So having online banking, that would be one solution. And also, as you mentioned, banks, one of the primary reasons we find that banks cannot offer loans for women or young people or even normal men would be the reason because they don't have financial records. So to give loans based on cash flow. So by encouraging people to move into online banking, so whether they like it or not, there is a financial record for it. So this is one area we can really work on to bring people into it, because you find a country, for example, which has a very high rate of women working is Vietnam. It goes to around 80%, but still 70% of the women in Vietnam don't have a bank account. So these are some of the problems which you find when it comes to access to finance.
What's your, I mean, we all know that a lot of millennials love to work in companies which are social responsible. Almost 60% people say that. What is your advice to a youngster who is starting a career on whether he should look at a company which gives him a good pay, or he says, "Hey, my friend, I love the environment, so I'm going to work for a company at half the salary." I mean, what's the advice you'll give him?
It would really it depends on the person. So, I mean, if he's really in need of a job, this is my personal view, I would encourage him to take the opportunity, because I don't want him to be in a desperate situation. He can always shift to a better position after he gets a bit financially better off or gets a better offer.
Oh,
So, to be a bit more understanding of the person as well. It's because the minute you go and say that kind of advice, it puts people off. So we also want to be understanding. And
so
it
Talal,
depends on the person. Yeah.
What are you going to do in the next? What are the plans you have for the next 3 to 5 years?
So next 3 to 5 years, I'm planning to work more on these two areas. Especially the other area I work on is gender equality. So I'm doing a lot of advocacy work on that as well. Co-writing things for papers for the World Bank ADB as well, and we're trying to put in a project as well on a regional scale. to more empower women. So that is one area that I'm focusing on. So that is this project, which is still in the concept stage, and I can't give much details, but mostly to develop networking for women entrepreneurs and access to market. So this is one thing I'm working on. And at the same time, being an entrepreneur, I'm always on the lookout for any new ideas to start a business.
Finally, Talal, I mean, our forest cover has gone down from something like 53% in 1990 to around 17% is what UN report says. I mean, how do we improve this reality?
So one thing is what's with that, we need to work on preventing more deforestation. But at the same time, there's something about reforesting areas. So there is a lot of initiatives going on. This we need not just to look up to the government for it, even the private sector. Like a good example would be Apple. Apple is by being when Apple says it's carbon neutral, it does not mean that everything in it does not use fossil fuel or does not emit carbons, but whatever the carbon it emits within the Apple factories and its own offices, it brings it down by reforesting areas in the developing world or providing solar panels in developing countries. So that's one area which Apple is working on. And the other thing is Microsoft. They're using carbon absorption techniques, technology, to make themselves carbon neutral throughout their history. So by 2050, whatever carbon emission Microsoft would have done from the time it was founded, it wants to take it back. So these are areas how the private sector could work in. And also, as I mentioned, it's up to us. It's always the people's power that wins. If we simply don't buy from products from companies that are involved in deforestation, then they're not going to spend so much money going into the forest and deforesting. And also using other techniques, like, for example, moving on to plant-based meat or lab-grown meat. So those are two startups that I spoke about. I mean, if people are uncomfortable with lab-grown meat, they can always shift to plant-grown meat, because meat production costs a lot. And also bringing in innovation, like the Google startup that I mentioned, can produce the same amount of farm produce, but with 95% less water. So with these kind of techniques, I think we can reverse it. And with also the last thing I want to talk about is I've been a big fan, even before Corona, of remote working. So that is one thing, because I always think that at the beginning of the, probably after the Industrial Revolution, the office came into being because there was a need for communication and information sharing. So with our technology, I mean, you can share anything nowadays. And as we are currently doing meet on Zoom, so there is less need of people coming into office. So as you know, in Sri Lanka, people live in Battaramulla, Rajagiriya. So every day to office, they don't just come, they bring a vehicle with them. So there is a lot of pollution. So we don't have to totally get rid of the office, maybe a hybrid thing where half the office comes in, the other thing. So this can reduce, because vehicle usage contributes up to 15% of carbon emissions. So these are some of the ways which we could reverse climate change.
Lovely. Talal, I was just looking at all the questions coming out, and I just summarized it and asked a few questions. But Kaushali, over to you. If you got any questions.
Yes, indeed. It's amazing to have listened to you, Talal, because especially some of our students who we met in the premises today, one of the most important discussions that they talked about, or they had rather, was what can I do to take care of my environment? So it's amazing, and it's an amazing start. And I, of course, have guided them to listen to you today. So it's a continuation of that motivation they have been given already. We do have a few questions, as Dr. Rohan said, had been coming in, but most of it he did summarize for you. But I do have one question, which, of course, to be addressed in terms of the new entrepreneurs or young student entrepreneurs. So, talking of the global level issues such as climate change, what would be your starting point as a young student entrepreneur, right? Uh, for them to engage in this type of a climate change, if they are to trigger it as a young entrepreneur, what would be the starting point of activities that they can do?
So, as a young entrepreneur, I would say, as I mentioned, so there's a lot of potential when it comes to starting ventures, especially on this area. And they say that the investments when it comes to sustainability goes in the trillions. So there is a lot of money to come into this area as well. And a lot of people want to invest in companies, like a lot of VCs, angel investors. They're looking to become more, to invest in sustainable this thing because of the brand value as well. I mean, they also want to show themselves as part of their corporate image to be sustainable. So this is a good field to go into. So I would say that if there is any innovative idea to start off when it comes to climate change, and also, as I mentioned, two things which is very important: try to get into an incubator or accelerator, and at the same time also get a mentor. So this having a mentor thing was something that I headed when I was working for a USAID project. So that's there's a huge it's hugely significant for people to have a mentor. It increases their success rate and reduces their failure rates. So I would say whatever idea it is, to start off with it, and with the proper guidance, with being part of an accelerator and having an incubator and having a mentor. I mean, that's like 50% of things assured. Right.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Talal, and we wish you all the very best. And may you have so many youth getting around you for this effort. And we are always open to have connected with you. I mean, we are virtually connecting today, but I'm sure very soon we will have the opportunity to meet you back in the university as well with all our students. So thank you so much for sharing this initiative and the discussion and all the other important things with us today. And that brings us to an end of another webinar series, another webinar. And we would like to meet you back again in another week. And for now, good night from us. Thank you, Talal, for joining.
Thanks, Talal.
Thank you, Rohan. Thank you, Kaushali. And thanks to all the students watching and everyone.